Hi, my name's Will. I'm a serial co-founder, founder, head of product for a variety of tech startups stay in all sorts of different spaces. And for the last sort of 18 months to 2 years or so, I've been digging really deep onto building cool stuff with AI. I posted a video a couple of months ago showing my workflow and how I was building apps at the end of 2025. And a lot of the queries that I got that came out of that were all about how I actually manage issues development and refinement, and how I effectively manage the product management side of that. So I thought I'd dig a little bit deeper into this video and show you how I do that. So first of all, I'm not going to go in great detail in this diagram. I'll share a link to it where you can look this up, or indeed you can just throw it at Claude Code and let it do its thing. But first of all, I'd say when I'm starting to build something, I tend to actually start in Claude on the web. I find that actually working in isolation to let it do some research, to let it do ideation is really, really helpful for me. And it also often, if you're working with external stakeholders, with other co-founders, etc., that might not work in that technical sphere, it's a great place to start. So what I'll do is work on that, work on what we actually wanted to do. And there's three typical documents and then an optional fourth that I tend to end up with. So first of all, I'll end up with my PRD, so my MVP PRD, which is usually a pretty lengthy document. We'll say in a reasonable level of detail exactly what we want that product or that feature that we're developing to do. We'll end up with brand guidelines. I like to have these in HTML, so straight away they're readable by Claude Code, ingestible into whatever you're building. And then typically we'll also end up with demo views. So in TSX or JSX format, and typically built out of shadcn UI components. If you want a little bit more detail on that process, I'd look at my previous video where I actually go through building an app in a little bit more detail. The optional fourth is actually a master vision document. So that's a sort of living document that runs through the project, and we'll say where we want it to actually get to in the end, and why we're doing what we want it to do. And the reason we do this is actually when you get into this process of product managing with Claude Code and Linear, you'll find that giving it a little bit of business context so it knows why you're doing things actually helps it make better decisions and helps it, importantly, ask better questions. And at that point, I'll tend to then head into a Claude Code environment. I tend to work in VS Code with the Claude Code plugin. I just like the user interface of that, but you don't have to, and there's loads of different options for doing that. So it's a Greenfield project. I'll create a repository at that point. I'll create a docs reference folder, and I'll stick those documents that I just created in. If it's something we're working on a brownfield project, something we picked up from elsewhere, if we're working on a feature in an existing project, we kind of drag those things in at that point. What I would say is as well, I'll come to this at the end, but I've actually built a Claude skill that will handle this process for you and manage what that looks like. So then I'll go into sort of a planning and work phase. So I'll be in Claude Code in that code base environment, and I'll ask it to have a look at the docs that are in the reference folder that I've created. And I'll ask it to use the product manager skill, which you can also find on my GitHub, to jump into the PRD in more detail and start to break that down into high-level issues. So what that does is ask a bunch of clarifying questions about what I want the outputs to be, and just gets a little bit closer to what that's going to look like technically. At this point, I've created a project in Linear, and then we'll use the issue creator skill within Claude Code to actually create those issues. And I'll show you a little bit more about what this might look like in that code environment if you haven't done this before. At that point, we have linear issues which are in the discovered status. And I'll show you what each of those statuses actually looks like and a little bit more about what they mean in a moment. So then one by one, what I'll do is take this through a process of refinement. So those discovered items might be pretty high level. So in fact, I'll show you a quick example. So this is within a project that I'm working at the moment. And it's a task management and AI-driven task management app. And this is what a discovered task might look like. So you see, it's really pretty high level. It's very conceptual. Some of these might even be more simple. They're kind of like I've just doodled through and added notes to stuff. We've gone through about stuff that I want to do in the future. And we might have those really, really high level tickets. The sort of ticket that, yeah, it might have existed in your backlog in a previous era, but you would never hand it off to engineers because it hasn't got any of the things you need to actually get it done. So then, as I say, I'll go through this process of refinement, and I'll typically, whenever I'm working in a Claude Code environment, I'll keep a separate Claude Code thread open whose job is just to do refinement and product management tasks. So I'll look at those discovered issues, or I'll look at the issues which I've asked it to look at specifically in discovered, and I'll ask it to explore that code base and that wider context I've given it, and it'll flesh out those tickets one by one. And typically, again, as we go through that refinement process, Claude will ask me a bunch of questions on clarifying details, and little bits of intent that I might have missed out, or edge cases that it's found, which we haven't quite drilled down to before. And so we'll move that ticket then into the refined status. And then at that point, it's a case of almost like traditional product management. And you can do that kind of manually yourself, or you can ask Claude to do that for you, but you'll have a whole bunch of tickets in that refined status. Again, let me just find one that I can show as an example. Okay, so here's a good example. This is actually a really pretty simple high-level ticket, but it's a refined issue where I've got in sort of greater detail exactly. In this case, it's designing an MCP, and it's part of that process to register the MCP resources that have been created. So I've got exactly what they're going to look like, what's included to them, and acceptance criteria. In other examples, in other projects, I might also have BDD, so behavior-driven development criteria, so that'll define the tests that I want to see as well. So at that point, yeah, you've got these issues in a to-do column or in your refine column, and you're dragging things into that to-do column in the order that you want them to actually get picked up. And again, you could be asking Claude to do this as your product manager. And at that point, you handed them over, issue by issue into the Claude Code development process, and that's something we can look at in a little bit more detail in a different video. And then I'll typically let them go into review, which is my human review process. And then if I found any issues, those things that come out of it, yeah, we might work just within that ticket if it's something that's kind of doesn't stop the workflow, but it might also create new issues and tickets that I want to pick up. So you've got this kind of mix of feature work that's defined by projects, and then you've also got that reactive work that's defined by those things that you pick up as you go. So that might be corrections on the way that Claude has implemented something. It might be bugs, it might be small tasks that really don't justify their own feature work. And so I'll let those sit outside of projects within linear, and I just pick those up as we go along. I tend to batch those together. So my typical workflow is that to do a bunch of big feature work, I'll do a really sort of concentrated sprint on those features, which will be organized as a project. And then I might, between those features, when I'm happy with it, pick up all those other little bits that I've built up. So tech debt, bugs, small tasks, little corrections and changes that I might want to make, and make lots of small and rapid releases to the product. And then typically at that point there, that I deploy them to preview environment, and then when I'm happy, they get pushed out to production. So a bit of a summary of those statements that I usually have. So it's discovered items, flesh them out into refined issues. When they're ready to actually go into development, I'm happy that they're high priority. They're going to do. At that point, you're picked up by Claude Code agent. They're developed, and then they're going to review, where I tend to have the human review process. Might not do that for every issue. I might batch issues together. So for a few UI changes that are all in the same sort of area of a product, I might ask it to go through. It'll make commits on every issue. I can see exactly what it's done, but I'll ask it to go away and do that work, and then I'll review it as one big chunk of work, deploy to preview, and then deploy to production. So I'll show you in a little bit more detail what that actually looks like. So we're sat in a project now, and you can kind of see the typical layout that I might do when I'm developing. You can see a bunch of different Claude threads that are running. So the one on the left-hand side is a single sort of development agent that's working on the stuff that we pick up as we go. The one I'm starting at the moment is my sort of product management thread. And then these other two are something that I'll cover in a different video, but this one creates a managed documentation, and this one manages my change log. So you can see here, this is kind of just a constant thread that I take through. I let it kind of self-manage in terms of context that, sometimes it's yeah, that cannot be the best way to do it. I might do it a different way when I sort of switch projects, but I tend to not worry about it hugely in terms of this project management king. So let's just do a little bit of an example. I don't think we've got a huge amount in the discovered column at the moment because we've been working on a bunch of big feature work, but let's have a look. So what's in discovered? Okay, so there might have been a little cut there. This kind of comes to a recent issue, but also something that just happens with MCPs. The linear MCP has been a little bit weird recently. There's been some slightly weird issues. So I just asked my product management agent to go and look away at what issues were on the discovered status, and it came back with a load of absolute nonsense, which is basically every issue that was on the board. Which is super interesting. Not quite sure why that's happening, but I've asked it to have a look at it, and it's found the two issues that I was expecting to see. So we've got two there. Now these are two kind of very different types of issues in discovery. So one of them, as you can see there, org 83 billing and token usage. It's a huge piece of feature work. That's not going to be a single issue. Org 76 might be, or it might be a handful smaller issues. So let's get on that. So let's define 76. Okay, so a few minutes have gone by. As we'd expect, it's pretty deep sort of examination process that we're asking this refinement to do. It's going in and having a look at the state of the code base and the intent of what we've written, and mapping that out into a more developed issue. So you can see the summary that we've got here. It's taken that pretty simple specification that we had, and it's broken it down into 7 key decisions that it's going to do. Each one of those is a pretty decent chunk of work. So actually jumping back into linear, you can see we had 2 items before and discovered. It's moved across to refined. So we find that it was org 76. So we've now got this full breakdown of what it's going to look like as a job. And I typically have a pretty good dig in at this point, especially for an issue of this size and work. And in fact, we might actually ask it to break it down into smaller chunks of work, so we don't end up with lost context when we end up working on it. But you can see some pretty important things that it's broken down at this point: the relationship to existing tickets, what migrations we're going to have, complexity, etc. So I think really for this sort of thing, where it's a pretty huge piece of work, actually, I'd probably ask it to take this and break it down further into sort of a smaller project. That's a pretty typical example of that refinement process. So I'll just quickly show as well the sort of project management element of that. So tickets that are sitting within that large feature work. So this phase 2 project, for example, is something I'm in at the middle of working on at the moment. So you see this sort of high level project outline. I also tend to use this when I use product management skills to plan the work, to actually tell it to, right, okay, on the main project page on linear, write down, how we should phase this, what tickets we can actually chunk together to get this stuff done. And you'll see if we jump in, we get that a little bit more detail about issues, their status and what they're working in, just specifically for that project. So that's that sort of typical workflow that I go through. So jumping back to this workflow documentation, what I've actually done is packaged up all this workflows, or the linear statuses, the linear MCP server, etc., into a Claude skill, which I'll link in the description below. So you can go to my GitHub repo, take that Claude skill, and ask either do it yourself or ask Claude to put that in your skills directory. And then if you run that skill within the Claude Code window, it'll actually set up within that project, including adding the product management issue creation skills, etc., that I've written for these purposes. And it will also append or update your Claude MD context documentation within that project to say this is how we're going to handle tickets. These are the linear issues statuses that we have. So if you're interested in actually doing that yourselves, I definitely recommend going and downloading those skills and give it a go. If you're not confident with Claude skills yet, I'm going to put another video together in the near future about how you can use those and how you can use those to actually make Claude way more powerful as a tool. So thanks. I hope you found this interesting. I'll put another video together soon.